Hello everyone, in this video we're going to be looking at something called Blazor-State, which is basically a library that can be used for state management in Blazor applications. It utilizes the mediator pipeline. So if you're familiar with this architecture, this library, and also the pattern itself, this is probably going to look familiar to you. There are also other solutions such as Fluxor, for example, which uses the flux pattern. But why would you even need this state management here? Well, you probably appreciate it more in more complex applications when you have like maybe multiple components and normally they would need to talk to one another in order to update the UI or things of that nature. And sometimes it may be very complicated, so you probably would prefer for it to be done like automatically. As you change your state, you update some variables, then you want the changes to be reflected in your UI. And it may be a hassle with all those event callbacks, especially if you have deeply nested components. So this is where things like Blazor-State come in. So let's just try to create a simple project here so we can just test out the basics and maybe also tweak it a little so as to see how like what we can add to it. So first we're going to say .NET new Blazor wasm. I'm going to call the project Blazor-State test. We're going to cd into that directory Blazor-State test. Bring Visual Studio Code over here, and this is the famous example with the counter, basically the weather forecast template. So it's gonna give us some blueprint to work with. Okay, so maybe let's just try to run it to see if it works at all. Say .NET watch. So here's this basic example. We got the counter page. As we click this button, the counter increases. But you can see that if we go to another page, it's reset. So let's see what we can do with Blazor-State. So first let's go and grab this package here. I go to the project file. I'm going to add it here. But actually I'm going to change the version number because this one still seems kind of buggy. So it may not work properly. So I'm going to use 8.10. Well, at the time you're watching this video, the numbers may be different, so you may actually be able to use the newer version without any problems. But let's just use this. Click restore. Okay, so let's just go to the tutorial page here. So we have some boilerplate code that we can use to make things easier. So first of all, we're gonna create a folder called features, and inside that features folder we're gonna add a folder named counter, which will correspond to the counter razor page. Okay, so over here I'm gonna say features counter. So inside this counter folder, we're gonna create a class named counter state. So new file, and let's copy this. Just adjust it a little by saying Blazor-State test. Actually, let's rename this because it doesn't, I think I put period at the end. So now it looks all right. And we're also going to configure the service, basically add this Blazor-State service to our program CS file. So over here, it's going to complain until we add the necessary usings. So Blazor-State and also system reflection. And now let's go to the counter razor page, and we're just going to replace the code that we already have with the modified version. And again, we're going to change this to Blazor-State test. So let's restart this. And now, as you can see, the initial count as specified here is 3. So we no longer have the initial value, but it doesn't work just yet. We're going to have to implement some actions to handle that for us. Alright, so basically we're going to mutate the state that we have here, the counter state, and change the count. So the rule here is that we should modify the state only using those actions and also those handlers. Those handles as specified here. That's the basic idea. So nothing else should modify those states. So now we need another like nested folder, which is inside the counter folder, and then actions and increment count. It's not necessarily that you have to do it in this particular way, but it just, you know, a good pattern, especially if your application gets more complicated, more complex. But at the end of the day, it's up to you how you organize it, so you can follow it. So now we're gonna say increment count action, new file, increment count action. So the name itself is, you know, self-explanatory, and over here we're gonna copy this code and paste this code. So I'm gonna say Blazor-State test features counter. Notice that this is partial class. It has this partial keyword here because we already have the other part here, and this action has to be nested inside the state it modifies. So that this is pretty important. Unless you put everything in one file here, which is probably not recommended, we have to use the partial keyword. All right, so it says we have the amount here, and now we're gonna go back to the razor file here, counter razor, and we're gonna replace this method here with this async task increment count. You can specify that it's private explicitly, and we're going to increase the count by 5. So as you can see, we're using a mediator here to send this increment count action and to cause the update. But actually, before it can really work, we need to handle this action as well. So there's one more file that we need. Also in the increment count folder, you can say increment count handler cs. And once again, we have to change this. So Blazor-State test. Now it should work. So as you can see, basically takes this action and increments the counter here by amount specified inside this increment count action. Alright, so looks good so far. Let's restart this and hopefully we can see it working. Okay, so as you can see, it increases the count, and even if we go to another subpage, it still retains its state here. So yeah, this example is pretty trivial. So because it's like actually inside the same class, the same subpage, so it doesn't really show us its full potential. So maybe let's just create a new file. I'm gonna call it component or maybe like count button razor, and also new file here, count status razor. And from this counter razor page, I'm just gonna take out some of the code. So I'm gonna take this here paste it into the counter button. And of course we need this. In order for it to work. And we don't really need this, so let's go over here, create a code section. Copy this role status. It displays the current count. And over here, we're just gonna copy this. This is not needed here. And going back to this count. So what are we going to do now is we're going to say count status and count button. Right, so let's save all of it. And let's see if it still works. Refresh it just to be sure. And now, yeah, it's still working. But the thing is that you actually have communication like in parallel between those two components, right? So it's not inside the same component because that's pretty useless, of course. It's just for demonstration purposes. But this is like a more justified, I would say, example. When you communicating between two components without having to pass like any parameters, or those cascading parameters, or some event callbacks. So this is actually pretty useful. And maybe let's create another action, since we have increment count action here. So maybe let's create an action called decrement count action, which will do the opposite. So it's going to make it smaller. So I'm going to copy this over here. Also specifying the amount. And again, in the file, we're going to say decrement count handler CS. And let's copy this over here as well. And just modify some things. And instead of adding this, we're gonna say minus. I know that is, or I realize that in this case it's a bit of an overkill, because you could probably pass like, a negative value here and achieve the same, but it's just to show you what you would have to do if you wanted to have like more actions, more handlers here. So let's go back here to the counter page, and maybe we're just gonna grab that button from here. Now back to the counter. So here we're just gonna say increment, and here we're going to do the opposite. And maybe by 4 this time. Let's just copy the necessary stuff, because I'm not really gonna make it a separate component. So let's save all of this and see if we can do anything here. So incrementing the value, and then we're kind of going back. So there you go. I guess this video doesn't explain everything, but I hope that it at least gives you a good start, something that you can build on. So if you like it, if you like this video, hit that like button. Consider subscribing to my channel so I can make more content like this. And hope to see you next time. Bye.